Yes. All right, cool. All righty. Welcome, Farai. I'm going to do a
Hi.
quick intro for you, and then you can add anything that you would like. I think most of my patrons are probably familiar with you at this point. Farai is the Hillbilly African on Instagram. Farai is a mother of one and expecting another, and she is a doula, an herbalist, and a community maker. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that about sums it. A writer also, but that's me.
Yes, incredible writer as well. All right, well, I'm going to get on into it, and yeah, here we go. So the question that I was probably the most excited about is about your parenting style. Do you have a favorite parenting style? Do you use a combination, and what brought you into it?
Yeah, I saw this question and I was trying to figure out whether or not I do have a specific parenting style. No, I think I tried to include elements of attachment parenting and respectful parenting, right? Just seeing my child as a whole being and trying to be in tune with that. So when she was really young, I definitely was in tune with attachment parenting, right? Like following her cues and developing secure attachment with her, just because I had this idea that, you know, if she was securely attached, then she would be an independent and really smart individual later on because she was secure in herself, right?
Yeah.
And that security comes from community and love and supporting parents or caregivers of some sort. And so I would say that was kind of like the beginning, but that doesn't attachment parenting, like the philosophies of it, if you read the books and stuff like that, it wasn't enough. And so I definitely just try to focus on seeing my child as a whole person, as a whole being. And I try to read up on brain development. And you know, there's this whole thing of, oh, the terrible twos and three-nagers. And while those things have come up in those phrases have come up in our society for a reason, the truth is there's developmental reasons that children, you know, struggle at those ages or may struggle at those ages. So educating myself was super helpful. And none of this comes intuitively to me. I wasn't respectfully parented or anything like that. And so
Yeah.
I just knew that I wanted it to be different for my child. And so I don't have a parenting style per se. I just, from an animist perspective, personally, I just try to see her as a whole person. It's hard, but it's worth
Yeah.
it.
The brain development thing, I feel like, is so helpful to get an understanding of their experience. But I
Yeah.
will say, outside of other parents that have had a child that is my child's age, I have a hard time finding that information online. Like, there's lots of articles on it, but some of it feel like they're written from like a very normie standpoint. And then some of them are a little too out there.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah,
hard.
I definitely think you have to mix and match and pay attention to your child and what works for them and include them in their I'm using the words discipline loosely, right? Including them in their discipline and yeah, I haven't been a parent very long. And so oftentimes I'm still figuring it out. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. The thing that I try to honor the most is like, if I'm struggling with my child, is my struggle because of them or is it because of me? And 9 times out of 10, it's because of me. It's
That's
because
a
of
hard one.
some trauma. Yeah, it's because of some trauma that I have or some trigger that I have, some shame, some embarrassment, you know, from the way that I was raised, or fear, right? Especially being like a person of color, seeing like I have this article that I wrote that's called Let Black Babies Be Wild and Free, but there's all this pressure on Black children in general, but there's this pressure on Black children to perform a certain way for their safety, right? If they're dressed well, if they behave well, then maybe we're less likely to be accosted or judged, or the myriad of things that we face in society. And so kind of letting those go, and being cognizant that sometimes if I'm having a problem with my child and how they're presenting themselves right in that moment, is it because of my own fear? Is it truly, a big deal if she's hollering in the grocery store? No, it's
Yeah.
not a big deal. Adults have fucking tantrums in the grocery store all the time. How many videos have we seen of grown people cussing, yelling, fighting at each other? And it's completely normalized.
Yeah.
And then when a child is having a hard time, we want to you know, whoop them or shame them or get them out of there, instead of just getting down to their level and being like, what's up? What's going on?
Yeah.
What are you having a hard time with right now? How can I help you? So that's where I'm at. I don't know what parenting style that is, but I'm figuring it out every day.
Yeah. Pulling inspiration from different directions. That
Yeah.
said, will you kind of sum up what attachment parenting style is
Um, I
to
don't know if I
you?
can. Yeah, to me, it's just making sure that your child has a secure attachment to you and their parents, their caregivers, or the family members in their lives. So listening to them, and it's things like, there's other tenets of attachment parenting that some people do, that some people don't do, but it includes from birth and infancy, baby wearing and breastfeeding and co-sleeping. It's just keeping a lot of modern day parenting is pretty isolative to children, right? The ABCs alone by themselves in a crib. And I'm not use your own discretion. If that's what worked for you and your baby and your family, and you still feel like they're securely attached, then I'm not judging. I'm just saying a lot of the things that the cry it out method and forcing children to do things before they're ready, like potty training and things like that. It's basically more about just building a strong relationship with your child, listening to them, watching them, and being connected with them.
Yeah,
So
supporting their rhythm.
yeah, supporting their rhythm and kind of, it's like, I want to say it's a more intuitive human thing, right? To do is to keep your baby close. And I didn't even know that that was called attachment parenting until I was here. Where I'm from, we do so many things that would be considered attachment parenting, like baby wearing and keeping them close and co-sleeping and things like that, and just connecting to the child in that manner.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. I remember reading an article about where a lot of the stuff that we're told now about it's bad to sleep with your baby, it's bad to XYZ. And I can't remember exactly what it was saying, but of course, just like a lot of other things within this country, a lot of it had to do with a goal outside of the family's goal, like you're saying about having children perform a certain way so that they can function in society a certain way. So that makes sense.
yeah, and then also like industrialization, right? If you're a single parent, or if you're in a two-parent household and you have to work, or you have to work overnight shifts, it doesn't make sense for you to be in bed with your baby, especially if you're tired, because it can put you or the baby at risk. You could roll over on them, you could hurt them, you could not pay attention unknowingly to you, right? Just because you're exhausted. If you're on some kind of medication, if you're sick in some way, that you really have to be attentive and alert to your baby and to yourself if you're going to be engaging in attachment parenting. And so I completely understand where a lot of these kind of non-attachment principles came into society. It's because we don't really have a society that's built to support caregivers and babies.
Yeah.
And so some of these things, they can be protective while they can be isolating.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. The next question's a little tricky. When you and your partner are not on the same page about something, such as parenting styles, what do you do?
This question happens. I see this all the time in local groups. And the first thing that I would encourage is to try and get on board before conception and pregnancy, but that's not always the case, right? And books and classes help if the other parent is receptive to them. Honest conversation, play therapy, and just putting your foot down is all I can think of, right? Because at the end of the day, that child, this life that we've brought in to our lives, whether through birth or adoption or anything like that, we've taken on that responsibility. And I know there's some caregivers that are like, I'm just going to do the best that I can and I will let the other parent figure it out. But I think there's a personal responsibility to try and educate that parent, because sometimes people just don't have the skills, they've never been exposed to it. And so just keep trying to influence them positively, modeling the behavior that you want, having honest conversations with them, sharing resources with them, and then sharing resources with them, and then maybe even like finding providers who can walk them through it, coaches, providers, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes it's easier to hear from other people, which kind of plays into the resource thing. I had a friend recently realize that she was taking in all of the information and all of the data on why certain things are better than others in the type of parenting that they wanted to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then while just kind of giving little bits and pieces here and there, expecting the partner to be on the same exact page, but they don't actually know because they don't have all the data that you do. So
Yeah.
it was like a very easy revelation of like, oh, you need to listen to this book too, or like you need to start taking in some information and listening to podcasts too.
Yeah, it definitely has to be, it can't be a one-sided effort. It definitely has to be the two partners working together to raise this person. I read something the other day. Someone had actually messaged me and she was talking, and it was such a good conversation because she said, me and my partner, we established set values, like what we want for our family, what we want our child to be like, right? Or the kind of parents we want to be for our child, essentially, right? Because we can't truly know what our child will be like.
Yeah.
And so whenever they get out of alignment with their values, they call each other in gently and patiently. But it was like, right, a unified front, just like you can be a unified front in being in relationship with each other or being in a co-parenting relationship with each other. You should also take, the sacred parts of, parenting this person together. And so, you can call each other in when things aren't working and are not in line with your values. And when she said that, I was like, girl, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The steps that you can take to be in alignment with whatever, especially because, yeah, a big part of the issues that people have with parenting and co-parenting is their own triggers. And it has nothing to do with the child. And I feel like 8 to 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, another.
Infancy.
What'd you say about infancy?
I said, especially in infancy and toddlerhood, it gets more complicated once they're teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Or because then they've got their own personal humanity
Yes.
that goes to the mix. Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to add to that was about the calling in thing. that can feel awkward or hard sometimes, especially if you're the one that's doing that all the time. And another friend of mine has a thing with their partner where every single Sunday at, I don't know if it's at breakfast or what, but that's like their day where they come to each other. They're, prepared. They are calm and ready. They know what to expect. It's also helpful to know, like, all right, this is coming up for me right now, but I'm going to give it a day or two. And then Sunday we can connect about it.
Yes, exactly. And it takes practice, especially if it's very foreign to you, or your partner, right?
Yeah.
Nonviolent communication, healthy communication is actually pretty uncommon, I would say. And so it can feel unfamiliar, but it's really good for children to hear that and see that and be a part of that and have that modeled for them. And it's good for us. It's so much better for our nervous systems than bickering and fighting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, a juicy one. Are there things from your childhood that you are actively trying to avoid in your parenting, or things that you are trying to bring into your parenting from childhood?
Probably violent communication, authoritarian parenting, right? Just and then just like not being heard or being seen as a child. And that was my experience a lot of the time. And so I would disassociated a lot. And just also, no whooping or anything like that. And then things that I'm trying to bring into my parenting from my childhood. My dad was very much an animist, loved nature, hunter, tracker, and was really respectful of the earth. So I would say that's what I tried to model in, is a love of the earth.
Nice. Yeah. Let me catch up here. Oh. Okay. What shaped and influenced your way of mothering?
Definitely what I didn't want to be like was one of the first things that I knew. And then being in community with other caregivers. So after I had my daughter, like really early on, she wasn't probably even a month old, I had joined like a bunch of gentle parenting groups and attachment parenting groups and La Leche League meetings and baby wearing and going to the breastfeeding clinic. And I started going to therapy. And I feel like being around people who are also trying to make the effort to be different for their children was probably my biggest influence. Having that positive behavior, having those struggles and those triumphs modeled for me by my friends, modeled for me in those groups, the conversations, the community. Those probably, sorry, my dog is snoring very loudly. Those are probably my biggest influences. And then my mom, say hi, Stanley. And then probably, my mom passed when I was 6, but I had like probably secure attachment. I don't remember much, but secure attachment from there a little bit. So just trying to tap into that love that I had, that I experienced from her, and then community, my friends. That's probably been my biggest influences.
Yeah, your way of mothering in community is insanely inspiring. And it also, every time I've asked you questions about like early on in Thandie's life or even in your pregnancy, it seemed like you really looked around for resources and used them, like going to the breastfeeding clinic. Like that's so simple. Whereas when I was asking you that question, the friend that I had that was experiencing breastfeeding issues was like, hadn't even considered that you could just go to a breastfeeding clinic.
Yeah, part of humans, we need a village, we need community, and all these things that we do now in isolation, like your postpartum period, your pregnancy, your breastfeeding, that never was what it was like for human beings beforehand. You grew up watching babies being born. You grew up watching people breastfeed. When the time came, yes, we're mammals and it's intuitive, but there's so many things that we don't know and we're taught, right? You don't just get up one day and start walking and crawling and eating. Like, people walk you through it. We walk ourselves through it. We teach each other how to do it safely and less in a less painful way, or so we need each other. And these systems are kind of, we're so alone, or sometimes maybe even if you do have women in your family that maybe they never breastfed, maybe they never had the opportunity to, so they don't know how to help you through that. And so now we've started, developing these groups and these things that try to fill the gap in. And so community is major key. I feel like I say that all the damn time.
Well, it's so true. And I want to also mention for people out there that are thinking, well, where is that? I don't have one. Or I always hear people say, like, yeah, well, where is the village? And I think you are a great example of that. You don't live in a hip city, you don't live in a big city. You utilize the resources that were available to you, and things like Facebook groups. And I know that that's been a big one for you, with even just connecting with other people and on the same things. Like, I feel like when it comes to motherhood and parenting, there's so many niche groups out there, and social media has made it pretty darn easy to find people experiencing the same exact thing as you. And even, things like finding someone in your region that's a teacher. Like, you introduced me to Sister Divine. She is in the Southeast. And when you take a class from her, you're taking a class with typically a lot of other people in your region. And meeting people that way is so incredible too. Like, trying to make sure that the classes that you're taking, from, the birthing classes, breastfeeding classes, anything, are not just online, but maybe if it's regional or in person or anything that you can take advantage of like that.
Oh yeah, I definitely was in in every like local parenting and mothering group that I could be in. I was in like my specific county is called Shawnee. So I was in Shawnee County Crunchy Moms. And then then my city, Moms of Infants and Toddlers. And then Kansas, I was trying to be local as much as possible because I was trying to make friends that way. I was trying to find my people. Or even going to, like, our little library had sometimes libraries have like baby bookworms or programs for infants and toddlers, and I would be there and I would strike up conversation with parents, or I'd strike up conversation with parents at the park, and just go from there. And there was this app called the Peanut app that I used. That's like, I called it Tinder for moms. It's a lot different now than it was 5 years ago because they've added a lot of elements, but I made like a really good friend off of there. Because I was feeling isolated in my community postpartum. After I left my job, I took her to work with me for 6 months, and then after that I was home by myself and I was alone, and I was like, yeah, this ain't gonna do. So you got to put yourself out there if you want it.
I feel like it's so important for children to grow up seeing other family dynamics too, especially like Augustine is an only child, and him growing up seeing my sister and her 2 kids was totally different, and just very important to him being able to form friendships with similar families. Let's see. Do you have experience helping folks with fertility? Any advice or resources?
See, I I've been getting this fertility question a lot this week, and it's nuanced, and I don't like to talk about it because it's a very sensitive topic to people, and sometimes people get offended.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they just can't handle it. And do I have experience helping folks with fertility? No. Do I have advice? Because I purposely stay away from it. Do I have any advice or recourses? Yes. Fertility begins preconception, right? Your fertility begins as soon as you are fertile. And so hormonal birth control and non-hormonal birth control can affect your fertility. Some people will stop taking the pill and get pregnant next month. Some people, will stop taking the pill and then can't get pregnant for 10 years. Hormonal and non-hormonal birth control react so differently in our bodies. And so the biggest thing that I recommend is not only for the person with the uterus, but for the person with the sperm as well, is for them to be both eating really good and taking care of themselves and nourishing their bodies. Because when you nourish those systems, I feel like those are the building blocks. And then there's so much like anxiety that people experience surrounding fertility that I feel like could be avoided if they just went and got tested. Like, go get your fertility tested. If you've been trying to have a baby for a year and it's not working out, don't internalize shame, because there's so many things. So there's so many factors. We're dealing with so many overwhelming toxins and adverse things that are happening in our bodies that I feel like the beating yourself up about it is pointless. If you're wanting to conceive and you're nourishing yourself and you're struggling, the person with the sperm needs to go get tested. The person with the uterus needs to go get tested and go figure it out. All this like angst and like worry that we've all got going on, really, I feel like is pointless. Just go get it figured out.
Yeah, the testing seems so important because I've seen situations where a friend's male partner will go and get tested and they're not able to create a child unless they do XYZ or maybe at all or whatever. And gosh, if you don't know that, you might put yourself through a lot of heartbreak for a really long period of time.
Yeah, and I was like, there's so many times, like men's fertility can be affected by kind of underwear that they wear or what temperature it was when y'all decide, there's so many things. So if you are concerned and you've been trying for a while, don't cause all that tension in yourself. Just go get it figured out and then go from there. There's so many amazing holistic and naturopathic doctors who can make recommendations on herbal remedies. For me, as a folk herbalist, my biggest thing is like, what are you eating? What are you nourishing yourself with? Before I even start recommending herbs and teas, what is your lifestyle like? What is your stress level like? How are you feeling about conception when you go to have sex? There's so many things.
And on the note of naturopaths and holistic practitioners, we are lucky enough to have recently found a doctor that as soon as you make a intake with them, they do a blood panel and walk you through that blood panel of your cortisol and your hormones, and it looks like you're having a sugar spike throughout the day, or your stress is causing this and you're low on this, high on this. That and is so important, getting your thyroid tested, etc. And I know, because we didn't have this option for years, that it can be really hard to find that kind of doctor, but there are actually so many apps now. I even got one in the mail the other day that I didn't sign up for, where you pee on a stick and you send it in and they upload the information into this app, that tells you what vitamins or minerals you're depleted on. And then also a doctor will send you a little write-up of like XYZ. So getting those panels, even if you don't have someone in your area, has actually become a lot more accessible recently. And I don't remember what that one was called, but I'm sure it's not any more special than the rest. So for anyone out there interested, I would just do a quick Google search on at home lab panels, at home blood or urine samples for lab panels.
Yeah, I've even seen them at Target now where you can buy the kit there. Yeah. And
That's
then,
awesome.
you make it off. Yeah. So definitely, yeah. The big emotional aspect is what makes me hesitant to have discussions with people about it. Cause I'm like, what's your stress level? What's your diet? How are you nourishing yourself? What are your, and then what are your levels? And then we go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And last thing before we close that out is not only is getting those tests important to potentially increasing fertility, but you might also find some dangerous factors in those tests of like, okay, well, I could get pregnant right now, but these levels are dangerously low, or my thyroid, my T4 is high, or whatever. So it can be
Yeah.
helpful for all kinds of things.
Mhm.
Okay. The number one question from most folks was about how to know what herbs are safe for your child at different ages. You definitely have an herbalist approach with Thandie that doesn't seem to have a lot of fear. And I love that. I know it might not have always been that way, but I know a lot of folks are too scared to trust their intuition on this one because there's just not a lot of info. There's not a lot of testing, obviously, on pregnant people or newborns or even infants. So do you have any advice on how to navigate that?
Yeah, I will say, um, from 0 to 6 months, anything that the baby needs, they should be getting from breast milk or formula. If they need other forms of medication, then I would get it from a pediatrician. Be like, they can't take a tincture, they can't take honey, they can't take anything like that because their liver and their digestive tract is just not ready for being able to synthesize anything like that. And so other ways that you can support babies without ingesting, right, herbal remedies is baths, right? Making teas and then giving them baths in that, especially if it's like skin things. Salves, making a herbal salve and putting it on them that way. Um, excuse me, when they're stuffy and things like that. And then steams, right? So typically the biggest challenge, I feel like there's tons of other things, but the big obstacles that babies have is like breathing and skin issues, butt rashes, things like that. And so steams with herbs, where it's not like you're putting baby's head over a pot of herbs, but just sitting with the baby. In what we used to do with Thandie is get in the bathroom, close the door, and turn the water on real hot so we get real foggy and steamy in the bathroom, and then we'd have herbs that way. We used to use essential oils, kid safe essential oils, if and like at the way less than the recommended dose,
Yeah.
like drop on a towel that sits in the shower that the water hits and then the steam comes up from.
Yeah.
And then yeah, or just doing it with fresh herbs, like if you pound the herbs and help them release, or just boil them and then use that steam, and then sit. You gotta think about what a baby is like and be safe, but holding the baby and then having the steam in the small room from a pot of warm water, that's a way. Steam inhalation is a safe way. Salves, and then baths, poultices, things like that will go on the baby's skin, or that the baby can breathe, are probably the only thing that I would recommend for infants. If you're going to get into toddlers, that's when maybe we can start exploring teas and glycerites. And then when Teddy would probably hit after the age of 3, maybe is when I started doing tinctures, and a dropper of tincture has about the same amount of alcohol that a banana does. And so all you need to do is just put the tincture in like tea, and then the alcohol will evaporate, and then you just give baby or tea or hot water, and then you give the baby not the baby, sorry, let me not say that, then you give the child the tincture that way without the alcohol. You don't have to burn it off or do anything like that. But glycerides are an also really safe way to get herbal remedies into children. And if you're worried about dosages, there's the Clark's rule or the Young's rule, and you can look that all up. Rosemary Gladstar has a really excellent book on herbs and children. Aviva Ram has what I call my Bible, which is the Naturally Healthy Babies and Children book. And she has, recipes and so much information, and it's by ailment, which I love. So it's like, if your baby has an ear infection, do this. If your baby has asthma, do this. If they have this, do this. So I think taking the pressure off, taking the shame off of yourself, recognizing, the world that we live in just has so many things that make it challenging for us. And so you need to take the pressure off of yourself and do the best that you can. And if you need to go in and see a pediatrician or see a physician, don't feel guilt. You've got to do at the root of it all, you've got to do what's best for your kid. And maybe if you've been trying herbal remedies to resolve something and it's not been working, get your ass to the pediatrician. And then also, remembering that those physicians, they're not gods.
Yeah.
Hold them accountable. Me, I will fire a pediatrician or somebody in a heartbeat if they make me, if they try to belittle me or shame me or anything like that. And I remember I had this pediatrician with her. We were cloth diapering, and I had not learned about stripping the diapers. And so she kept getting this rash, and I couldn't get rid of it. It was yeast, and I didn't know this. So I go to the pediatrician, and I'm like, she has this rash. And then she immediately is like, give her a steroid cream. And I was like, she's really young. I don't want to give her a steroid cream. And the pediatrician goes, you're right. I don't like prescribing steroids. Why don't you try, coconut oil and like leaving her bum dry for like leaving her without a diaper for as long as possible. And I was just like, why didn't the pediatrician tell me coconut oil first?
Yeah.
It didn't come from me. She said it.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, coconut oil is antifungal, just make sure that you get this kind, and put it on her. And I was just like, why wasn't that your first response? But and then there was other times when she needed, like, when she would have needed something like a prescription or something that I'm grateful that I have that. But so yeah, don't be afraid to question them. Don't be afraid to ask them about side effects of medications like that. Don't be afraid to ask them for over-the-counter remedies if the things that you've been trying have not been working out. But that coconut oil worked excellent in getting rid of the yeast, or and so yeah, I think if you look at it in the spirit of collaboration with yourself and your child and whoever you've chosen as your care provider for them, then that takes away a lot of the stress and the worry, and the collaboration with the plants. And those books will give you, what herbs and things that you should do with them. But, I love catnip, chamomile, calendula, marshmallow, slippery elm. And then once they're older, then you can get into more powerful herbs, I guess. They're all powerful, but you know what I mean.
And stronger extracts and stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, I wanted to mention a few things about the nuance with herbal remedies for newborns and infants and stuff. Because a friend of mine yesterday was like, I just wish that when you were looking up tinctures and herbal remedies, it would say breastfeeding safe or infant safe. And I was explaining why they can't say that, because she was like, why don't they ever say that? And I get those questions all the time, and I always feel bad that I can't answer them. But the reason being, if you are on SSRIs and I say that St. John's wort is safe for breastfeeding, well, it's not safe for you breastfeeding because it's going to counteract a medication that you need. So
Yeah.
the reason that people cannot make those broad statements, even though yes, this herb is generally safe, is because it's very individualized.
Yeah.
And then a couple more things that I wanted to add to the remedies. I love the idea of steaming, because I think the biggest thing that comes up, like you said, is breathing issues. And when a baby has a fever or a cold or something, that's like the first most terrifying thing that can happen. And you might be feeling overwhelmed because you want to reach for something internal, but other like the chest rub, like you mentioned, but inhaling those really great herbs for your lungs, like mullein. Mullein is amazing for smoke, which obviously a baby's not going to do, but the reason it's great for smoke is getting it directly into the capillaries of your lungs. So inhaling those herbs could even be better than giving some sort of internal thing that passes through the bloodstream. So I love the idea of steam, like just incorporating steam. And then the essential oil thing, there's a lot of fear around that, as there should be. But if you're not applying it directly to the skin or internally, things like steaming or even putting a few drops in a humidifier is totally awesome.
Of kid safe essential
Yeah.
oils. Yeah, like specifically I like the brand Plant Therapy because it's not an MLM, and they have um a kid safe line. Um so that's one that we go with. And I forgot to say on the breastfeeding part, if you are breastfeeding and your infant is sick, your breast milk is what will help them. Um so your breast milk makes the antibodies for whatever it is that is ailing them, and then they get it directly from that way. And so that's why everyone kisses babies, but that's where we get that urge from, is to kiss babies, is to pick up any pathogens that they have around them that may be around their nose or mouth. And then our body takes those pathogens and makes antibodies, and then those antibodies will be present in the breast milk. And so if you are not on any medication, that you're worried about adverse reactions with specific herb or with specific plants, you can take whatever it is that you think that would help the baby. So if it's echinacea, or if it's chamomile, or if it's catnip, you can take that tincture. You can drink that tea.
Yeah, I think that's the coolest thing ever, that
Mhm.
you can be the vessel for the newborn. You can take those remedies, or eat a bunch of raw garlic and onion and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think that was like my biggest thing about I guess my biggest angst about weaning was like, oh, she's losing her free antibiotics.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't going to be able to provide that for her anymore. But I was also done weaning a giant 3-year-old.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then body oiling seems like that would be pretty killer for
Oh yeah,
getting
that's
herbs into babes.
yes, for sure. Just in my culture, we keep children heavily covered in oils and fats.
Glazed
Uh,
donut.
yeah, glazed donut. It's just also good for the nervous system,
Yeah.
and massaging and like being in touch with your baby or your toddler and their bodies is, and that touch is so important to securing for a secure attachment.
Yeah, I was really comforted from early to, forever by my mom scratching my back. And I remember Amber Magnolia talking about how she would constantly baby oil her baby. And as her child grew older, like that became something that they were able to do themselves to self-soothe. And I just think that's so awesome, because it really is like having those soothing techniques is really great.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Well, oh, wait, are there more? Okay, we kind of talked about, yeah, the next question, which is the best way to administer herbs to newborns, your favorite menstruums, how to know how much. Yep, you answered that.
Well, I was just saying, I'm checking my notes here. Paying attention to their bowel movements will also kind of give you an idea of whether or not they're ready to eat food or digest or even take more complex herbal remedies. So avoiding, giving them anything until they're ready to eat is when then I would be comfortable with exploring the idea of taking glycerites and things like that.
Yeah, my two friends of mine that have newborns right now, it's so interesting to hear how often they analyze their baby's poo. And it makes so much sense. Like if you eat dairy and your child's poop changes, keeping a log of like what you're intaking that's causing those bowel movement changes is so interesting.
Oh yeah, I don't know when I'm gonna stop. I still watch her poop daily. And if I watch my friends' kids and they poop at my house, I'll be like, okay, well, this is what their poop was like. And my friends are like,
Yeah,
no, but it's a good indicator of internal health. Just like
totally.
your menstrual blood is a good indicator of your health, your overall health. Poop is too. And so even my child now, she knows she'll come if I'm not home when she poops, she'll be like, Mom, this is what my poop was like. And in her head, I'm like, man, we are a one weird family.
Yes, but also she is learning how to take care of herself,
Mhm.
and that's so awesome.
Yeah, except her hypotheses about why her poop is shaped the way that it is has nothing to do with, the bio, like the things that I'm paying attention to. She's like,
Yeah,
mine is shaped like a spoon because I'm hungry, Mom. And I'm like, no,
yeah,
that's not.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any advice for first-time breastfeeders?
Uh, don't try and do it alone if you don't know what you're doing, because you will lose steam if you're unsupported, I feel like. Especially, if baby is having a hard time and you're having a hard time. Definitely try and get, a doula or a midwife that has those skills, or try to find a lactation consultant, or try to see if local hospitals to you have breastfeeding clinics, join local breastfeeding groups, try to attend meetings or virtual meetings. And then if baby has things like, sometimes, latching can be painful because baby needs craniosacral adjustment or lip tie reversals or something like that. So that's why, sometimes it can be really hard to puzzle those things out. And so finding local community resources can be helpful. So
That
some
is,
people are figured out by yourself, but it's such a tender time in your life that you deserve help, and you should help set that up for yourself.
yeah, that is huge. Two friends in the past year have gone through the tongue or lip tie thing and didn't know right away and thought that I'm failing or this isn't working, and it was such an emotional time for them, obviously. But
Yeah.
had they, known sooner, I mean, one of them found out pretty immediately. One of them waited for a while because it was just not something that had ever even been brought to their attention. But it's so interesting now that I've learned about that. I feel like I hear adults talk about it pretty often too. But yeah, what is it? Craniosacral?
Yeah, therapy, taking them to a chiropractor, because birth puts a lot of strain on the baby sometimes, and sometimes they have like a tight jaw and latching is hard for them, or sometimes they just need an adjustment or a massage or something. And a really good chiropractor can help address that. And this is one of the things about being in community with other caregivers, is that they, especially like-minded caregivers, is they may have already vetted you know, physicians or people like that, and can recommend a good person.
Yeah, that's
So
huge.
you don't have to, you know, like, so you don't have to essentially, you know, kiss a bunch of frogs before you find a good provider. So
Yeah. Kissing a bunch of expensive frogs too.
expensive frogs, yeah, because all these other kinds of interventions, they cost money because they are maybe not necessarily covered by insurance, or they're considered naturopathic versus, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. A lot of my friends that have gone to the craniosacral person, it's been awesome, because even if the intake is like $150, they walk away with all these exercises that they can do at home. So it's not necessarily the kind of thing where, like an adult, you might go weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. One visit
Yeah,
could totally change things.
yeah, and then, you know, there's a lot of things in our modern day society that can interrupt a breastfeeding relationship, from the births we have to the diets we have to the stress we're under, you know, to even providers, right? Like, immediately people are giving you formula, and those bottles, is much easier for baby to get milk from than it is from the nipple. From the nipple, they have to work for it. So I, you know, I experienced that with my daughter, because she was on donor milk briefly when she was first born. And after getting it from on the bottle, she didn't want a nurse. And we had to, yeah, she was just like, shoot, I got this. I can do it from here, where it just comes to me real quick, versus having to like get on your boob and figure it out. And I had to work with her, and a nipple shield and a lactation. Like, I was at the breastfeeding clinic every day with someone helping me latch, until she finally realized, you know, okay, fine, I'm not getting the bottle anymore. I guess I'll figure
Yeah.
this breastfeeding thing out. Because they're smart. They want to survive. They want milk. And they figure it out. And so, you know, if there's something that interrupts that breastfeeding relationship, then they're going to take to the bottle.
Yeah.
And there's so many other, you know, there's so many other factors that, you know, can interrupt that breastfeeding relationship. So it's work, I feel like.
For sure.
Yeah.
Did with your birth with Thandie, if you're comfortable answering, did you have a midwife or doula?
I started off in a birthing center. No, actually, I started off in the hospital. And I, you know, I met with the midwife at the hospital, and she was really nice. And I liked her a lot. And then when the nurse gave me the tour of the hospital, they were very much like, when you have your C-section, this is where it will be.
Ooh.
When you circumcise your baby, this is where it will be. And not even a like a choice, or this is where we do. No, it was very much like, this is the way that things are here. And my intuition was just like, get the fuck out. And I was like, okay, this is not going to work. So I switched over to a birthing center. And the birthing center was great, but it wasn't what I needed. I think I needed, sorry, my dog wants to get up. I needed way more individualistic care than when I got at the birthing center. Oftentimes, well, specifically here in my area of town, the birthing center, they've faced a lot of pushback from doctors and things like that. So in a way to legitimize maybe themselves, it, like, I'm not saying they were like a doctor's office, but that one-on-one care that I needed, I didn't really get.
Yeah.
And so, and then also just my own personal things, like being incredibly malnourished, being very stressed out, being very scared. Those all played a role in being transferred to the hospital for a hospital birth. And thankfully, which all births are, the births that needed to have happened, but I was able to deliver vaginally, which was like my main goal. But it wasn't the best birthing experience, and which is more common than in America than not, I guess. And so I started off hospital, then went birthing center, but ended up in the hospital again.
With a midwife.
No, with the OB is the one that I use the term loosely, delivered her. And then it ended up being fine because she needed to be in the NICU because we had a blood incompatibility. But yeah, it wasn't the most traumatic birth, but it wasn't the one that I wanted.
So the midwife that you had originally met with was not there?
No, I transferred to because I labored at the birthing center, and then mid-labor.
Okay.
Yeah, they transferred me to the hospital, and so it was an OB there. That
Okay.
I don't think that hospital even has midwives.
And now for your next birth, you have a midwife that you're working with.
Yes, I have an at-home midwife, and it's a
Yay.
completely different experience. Yeah.
And are you going to have a doula as well, or do you feel like you don't need that?
My friend Carrie is my doula.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay,
She's
so
great.
you are a doula, and I'm wondering if you have any resources for people who don't have any friends that are doulas on how to find one.
Doulamatch.net is where doulas typically advertise themselves, and I think they can even you can see like reviews for them there. And then just trying to find local doula organizations close to you, asking people around you that have used doulas, and yeah, that's it. That's all I can think of.
And what about for midwives?
Midwives is the same thing. I would just Google. Well, first off, if you're joining these groups, depending on whether you're joining, like mother or parent groups for your community, and then asking people for referrals in there, and getting reviews from people like that, or just Googling people and then meeting with them and asking them questions, being informed on your own before you even meet with them, so that you can see whether or not it'll be working out. And then also, don't be afraid to fire somebody if it don't work out.
Yeah. It seems like that should be a pretty intense interview process. Partially, hopefully you feel a connection, and then partially asking the questions that are really important to you to make sure that this person can represent you in a pivotal moment of decision making. And yeah.
Exactly.
Someone said to me in the past year that they felt, or that their midwife was talking to them about how important it is to have someone present in the room with you in the event that you do end up at a hospital, who knows exactly what your birth plan is and what decisions you would make in the event of XYZ, other than your partner. And I thought that was so interesting, because she was expressing that your partner is going to be in that like painful, empathetic place with you, where just like you are, they have totally lost touch with what was originally the plan, because now you're in this really scary or really painful place, and decision making is just not easy. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors take full advantage of that and do what's best for them and not for you. So it just seems so important to have those kinds of conversations, as scary as they might be, with your midwife or doula.
Yeah, that's exactly what a midwife or doula would do in that instance. And yeah, Anthony was definitely like, because he was very much like pro birthing center birth. So when we had to transfer, his fear started. And like, as soon as we walked into the hospital room, he was like, they're going to try and put her in stirrups and they're going to, he was like already kind of snapping at the nurses, like, oh, are you going to force her to do this now? And I was like,
Yeah.
bro, yeah, he wasn't, yeah, like you said, he was already scared and he couldn't be an advocate. And that's what midwives and doulas are for you.
Yeah. So
And that,
you need to trust them.
yeah, and make sure you have a good connection with them.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, this was awesome. I'm really excited.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say before we close it out?
I do not.
Alrighty. Well, I'll see you in a second.